And now let me welcome the first presentation. I don't know who of the three will present. Mihaela. Yeah,
Yes.
so the floor is
It's
yours.
me. Dear organizers and dear colleagues, the honor of representing the results of
I
our
think we
research.
cannot hear you for some
Oh,
reason. Or
do you hear me?
Yes, I do.
Cannot hear
Okay.
you.
Yes,
Thank you.
we
Yes,
hear
we
you
can.
perfectly.
Okay. So I can proceed. Yeah, okay. Well, as I said, the honor of representing this research is upon me, and I'll try to do my best. Well, just a moment to share my presentation with you. Okay. Well, this topic today concerns about investment funds, where we put an accent on investment funds which are established as entities with legal personality. Oh, just a moment. Oops. I'm just experiencing some technical problems. I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, investment funds can be formed in really various legal forms. And from comparative experience, we saw that some funds are established under trust law, under contract law, under company law. And in all of it, some of them have legal personality and some of them don't have legal personality. Since having or not legal personality is rather decisive element for Croatian funds, we decided to put the focus of our research upon it. So for today's discussion, I shall also touch upon redemption right because it is important for understanding. Redemption right is something which is used as a yardstick for differentiating between two different types of funds, between open-ended funds and closed-ended funds. So what is a redemption right? This is a right of an investor who perhaps becomes a shareholder to request from the fund to redeem its shares, meaning that it is not necessary for him or her to sell the share to a third person or to go to a stock exchange market, but it can request the fund itself. And if the fund is formed as, for example, in a joint stock company, it in fact can request from the management to repurchase its share, which is rather a radical idea if we are beginning from the traditional corporate governance issues of these companies. Anyway, when an investor or a shareholder has this right, then we talk about open-ended funds. Sometimes it's called mutual funds. And when the investor does not have this right, then we talk about closed-ended funds. Now, in which legal form shall the fund be established? It's the decision of the founder. But which legal forms are available for establishing the fund? It depends on the legislation of a country. In European Union, each member state practically have different solutions regarding this topic. So we focused our research on a joint stock company, which when it is chosen, it always has a legal personality. And as such, we have some prominent examples, which we would then like to compare with Croatian solutions. Anyway, we chose Germany and Luxembourg as two prominent centers for investment fund industry in Europe. And there we analyzed their two distinguished investment vehicles. The first for Germany is Investment Aktiengesellschaft or Investment AG or investment with variable capital. And on the other side, we analyzed Luxembourg and its famous SICAV. Now, let us see what happened in Germany and if there are some lessons to be learned. Investment Aktiengesellschaft was introduced in the German legislation in 1998. It was introduced as investment fund in the legal form of a joint stock company. It offered no redemption right, meaning it was a closed-ended fund. The goal was to boost the venture capital industry because it prefers long-term investments. However, this actually failed because no such a fund was established, and the reason was because it was considered that it actually offered no competitive advantage, no new advantage in comparison to already existing legal forms which could be used for doing investment business. In 2003, the German legislature decided for a drastic change, and it transformed this fund from a closed-ended one to an open-ended one, meaning that now the shareholders had the right to redeem their shares, which is really a drastic change towards traditional joint stock company. Additional drastic changes came in 2007, which here I would only highlight the possibility that these funds, even as joint stock companies, have external manager, which is something in traditional corporate governance that we actually can't talk about it at all. Today, it's possible to, in Germany, it's possible to establish two types of joint stock company as investment funds. With variable capital, which means that here the investors have the redemption rights, and the capital and the investment again with fixed capital, which means that here investors do not have that right. And in practice, which is also a very significant factor, is that the investment again with variable capital is significantly more popular. Now, some considerations stemming out from the literature based on these facts is that indeed, investment again with variable capital, although it is really very popular in practice, it introduced significant deviances from the traditional joint stock company. So it's no wonder that some authors really heavily argued whether we can designate the investment again as joint stock company at all, or has the legislature created, in fact, a completely new legal form? Okay. Now let's see what happened in Luxembourg. In Luxembourg, SICA was introduced in 1983, and there were some, and through all of the legislative changes, it's very significant that practically the provisions relating to SICA remain the same, which means that it was a success story from the beginning, and today it forms the most popular investment vehicle in Luxembourg. And SICA actually served as a role model to German legislature when it introduced investment again with variable capital in 2003, as was previously seen. SICA, as its German counterpart, is a joint stock company. It has legal personality. It offers a redemption right. Company law here applies, yes, but only lex generalis, while the advantage is given to the investment fund regulation, which significantly differentiates from traditional joint stock company in Luxembourg as well. It also offers a possibility to be externally managed, which is actually the practice for this fund. Being said, let's go to Croatia. Let's see what happens here. The story about investment funds began in 1995. And when we look upon the funds with legal personality, it was possible to form it only as a joint stock company if it wanted to have a legal personality. And it could only be a closed-ended fund, which means that you could not offer investors the redemption right. However, no such fund was established under this law. 2 years later came from a different standpoint came a new law on privatization, excuse me, for privatization investment funds. And although numerous privatization funds were established, they are relevant for our discussion only because after 5 years of their existence, they should then be transformed into classic closed-ended investment funds. However, we shall see that only few of them actually survived this transition. Sorry. In 2005, we have a new law. However, regarding these funds with legal personality, it still remained on its solution that it can be only formed as a joint stock company. Still, it is a closed-ended fund. However, now shares of this fund are to be admitted on the stock exchange, which is also comparative, which is also present in comparative practice. Also, some special rules for real estate funds were introduced, which resulted in that in practice we had 4 real estate funds and 2 privatization funds, which continued as closed-ended fund. I mean, these numbers clearly show that this instrument, this investment vehicle, was not popular in practice. When we entered the European Union in 2003, there were some major legislative changes for both UCITS funds and alternative investment funds. However, no big changes were done when we look upon the funds which could be established with legal personality. The only news that came here is that now, besides the joint stock company, founders could opt for a limited liability company as a legal form for establishing a fund with legal personality. However, I must add that till now, there is no fund at all which would be established in Croatia and with the legal form of a limited liability company. So what we are talking about is that we are always talking about the joint stock company in Croatia as a possible fund with legal personality. Today, we have 4 such funds, which still clearly says that it is not it is not a successful story for a Croatian legislator. Now, let us see some basic features of Croatian funds with legal personality. They both offer possibility of having an external manager, as it is in comparative practice. What we found a very controversial solution is that a fund and an external manager, although being 2 separate entities, they have the same management board, meaning the Croatian legislature said that the management board of the external manager, which is also in fact a company, shall serve as a management board of the fund with which it manages. We find this solution not satisfactory. As to the supervisory board and the general meeting, it is evident that the legislator tried to empower investors, which now act as shareholders, and to entice them to be a little bit more active in influencing perhaps the management policy. However, this is far from being said that they have a control over a real control over investment strategy. Now, being said about the comparative law, Croatian law, now I would like to present you some focal issues of our research. We found that external management is actually an open issue in all legislative framework. It's not clear what is the relation between the management board of the external manager and the management board of the fund, especially for Croatia. Depending on the national legislation, we can come to different solution, which is not good because we have typical questions of liability towards both towards the fund and towards the investors. Further on, although they are formed as joint stock companies, these investment funds, they actually change some basic paradigms of corporate governance. So when we speak about duty of loyalty, it's very hard to speak that investors have duty of loyalty towards the fund, since the entire investment fund industry is oriented towards protection of the interest of the investors. So for example, even the management boards of the fund, whether it is internally or externally managed, should act in the interest of the investors, not in the interest of the fund. So it's very hard to say that then investors should act in the interest of the fund, although we do speak in a larger meaning about the company and about the concepts which differ then from the traditional understanding. In all of it, we touched upon the possibility that corporate governance codices could perhaps enhance all of these questions, at least raise awareness and perhaps help in really analyzing the potential conflicts and risks of management and of corporate governance in these vehicles, since they do significantly differ, and we could not escape the conclusion that this issue is severely neglected in both literature and in law. And finally, to our two final conclusions is that investment funds, when they come, even when they come in the form of a joint stock company, which we always say we do understand very well, if they significantly differ from their origin, and this and for those funds which offer redemption rights, they certainly do, should they be analyzed through traditional questions of governance in joint stock companies at all? Are we speaking about joint stock company at all? This is our most crucial question. And for the Croatian perspective, it is clear that the current state did not offer a successful story. So we believe that Croatian legislators should more adapt the existing form, perhaps following some ideas from a comparative perspective, which we presented. And certainly, we believe that some new additional forms also possible would be very good to introduce them. For example, limited partnership is one of the most famous and most often used forms, especially for alternative investment funds when we look about it comparatively. So we believe that there is a lot of place for Croatian legislature to introduce it in Croatia too. Anyway, these are our final
time is out, please. Yeah, time is out.
Yeah, thank you for the attention, and I'm definitely open for any discussion regarding the issues we raised.
Thank you, Mihaela, for very interesting and also critical presentation regarding the legal framework for investment funds in Croatia. Should there be any questions, please use the chat option and write them down. I will then at the end, during the discussion time, read them aloud.